I've heard you say the same thing that's made you an alcoholic and led to your addiction is the same thing that's made you successful as an entrepreneur and as a business person. What did you mean by that?
Um, yeah, it's just like the impulsiveness of like, I think that I don't know anything about alcoholism or substance abuse other than my own experience, but there's like an impulsiveness of like, I have to do something.
Mm,
And that carries over to other facets of life. At least it does for me. And so it's just like a F it, I'll figure it out later, which doesn't work in a lot of facets of life, but that attitude is quite successful or quite useful when it comes to business.
yeah, for sure. I mean, because I think like as an addict, I think what happens is you don't care about the risk. You just keep going no matter what. You're like, I don't care if I fail. Like I'm just gonna get to this thing, like no matter what, because it's so important to me and I'm not gonna stop um until I get it. I think like one of the other things that is really awesome about your story is that the role that fitness and health has played not only in your sobriety but just in your life in general. So who were you before you found health and fitness, and how has it been transformative for you?
So I was growing up, I was very fit. I was never healthy because I didn't eat good, but basically I was a Division 1 track and field athlete. I used
Right.
to be like a very, very elite athlete. And then I quit because I like got into partying basically and I got fat. And then I quit boozing, and that was hard, but I basically like one addiction went from like alcohol and then to sugar. And I was cool with that because it helped me not drink. So I was like, whatever, who cares? I'll worry about it later. That same attitude. And so I just like ate tons and tons of candy. I could eat M&Ms, like only M&Ms for like a week straight. I like love that. But then I met my wife and she was a health nut and she like was like, "Hey, that has a lot of carbs." And I'm like, "What the hell is a carb? I don't know what that means." And I remember seeing a picture of myself with her and I looked very lumpy. I think I was 25% body fat and I looked horrible. And I remember seeing these guys on Instagram and I was like, I'm way more athletic than those guys are, but I'm fat right now. I want to look like that. I think I could do that. And so my friend group, I like texted them. I go, I am officially going to become an Instagram fitness influencer today. And so I just like made it my identity. And then, so I kind of became that. I kind of got fit again. But I was always like pretty naturally gifted at athletic stuff, but I just ate horribly. Like it was really bad. And so, but once you get older, even when you're younger, you're like, no matter how hot the oven burns, you know what I'm saying? Like you can still get fat. And I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. And given that you had like this addictive past and everything, and I know sometimes when that's in the background, it can make it more challenging to like stay on the healthier path, specifically with eating. Like, what were some of the things that helped you like early on in that journey, other than your wife holding you accountable and seeing some inspiration on Instagram? Like, what helped you stay consistent?
Well, A, reading a ton, like just reading like different books helped. But then B, like I don't want to like discount this because I think it's unfair to the listeners, but like I sold my company and so I had money and I had a lot more free time than before. Before my excuse was I'm too busy. I can't get fit or I should just eat whatever's available. Then I sold my company and I had more time and more money. And so like that helped. Although now I realize that that was actually a bullshit excuse. Like no matter how little time you have, I can make it work and I just prioritize it. But that helped. And then I also hired a nutritionist for like $250 a month. I use this service called My Body Tutor, which I love, and they like phone call you either once a day or once a week, depending on which service you sign up for, and they like educate you about your week's plan and what your next week's plan is and things like that. And then I hired a fitness coach, just like I had in college because I was an athlete, and so basically like accountability. So making it to where like I don't have to think, I just do what they say, and having very clear cut goals. So every quarter I create a goal. Um, where it's like I want to do a NFL combine and I want to score average for a wide receiver, or I want to run this time, or I want to squat 450 pounds, or I want to bench whatever, or I want to do this or that. I always have a goal. I can't just like I like doing it, but I can't go just to go. I have to have a target. I have to be competitive.
That's awesome, man. I love how you shoot for these like insane goals, which I think is incredibly like inspiring. We were talking before we recorded about, one of the things that really scared me was like jumping into a pool with like Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reece, and how that was super intimidating for me. Could you ever see yourself doing anything like that? Not specifically like maybe with them, but something where you're actually like in the arena with like some of these people who are like some of the best in sport while you're trying to like achieve whatever it is you're looking to achieve.
So a few quarters ago, I trained for an amateur boxing match,
Mm.
and I ended up backing out because I had hurt someone one time. I hit them a little bit too hard and I hurt them. And then I had gotten hurt. I got hit in the head really hard and kind of went out for a second. And I backed out because I was like, oh, I've got way too much to lose. I can't do this. And so I've wanted to like be in the arena and like do this stuff when it comes, but like there's a few things I would never do. So anything that involves like these long distance runs where you have to like sleep overnight outside and stuff like that, I'm not tough enough to do any of that stuff. I would maybe go to Laird's, maybe. It depends. I don't know if I would go all out, but I've done like a half Ironman. I probably would do an Ironman. I just don't really like it. But I would do most things, but I don't do any like, or I don't like doing certain stuff where it involves like being outside all day. I also hated the Ironman because it took so freaking long to train for. It like didn't feel like it was like conducive to like longevity. But I would do some in the arena stuff. Like the mega ramp that like you see the skateboarders go down.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to do one of those. Uh, and I skate still. I'm pretty good. I'm a good skater. I think I could do one of those. So that's something I really want to do. And I've always wanted to do the really steep downhill mountain biking where they go like 60 miles an hour.
That's awesome, man. It's super impressive. I think like one of the things that I'd like to provide some context for the listeners is you mentioned you sold your company and you made some money and you got a lot of free time now, and you didn't start here. Like there was so much that happened before this. And I know you started to drink in school to kind of like deal with some insecurities and some discomfort. So talk a bit about like your childhood, how you grew up, and then how that led you down this destructive path.
I grew up in Missouri, just like a fairly normal household, but I think that like I had some things happen when I was a kid that made me very anxious. And
Mm.
so at a very young age, I suffered from panic attacks.
Mm.
I also think that like I didn't realize it at the time, but in Missouri or where I was, like drinking is part of the culture. Like it's very embedded. So it's like every single day after work, you go to the bar. And I just thought that was normal. And because of that culture, that attitude where it's okay to have a beer like during all meals and things like that. And also, I think there's some genetic things going on. And I had a really bad panic issue.
Mm.
I think that when I like turned like 19, I realized like, oh, this alcohol, like it makes me not get panicky. That makes me feel good and it makes me a little bit numb. And so I don't freak out. And so I used it as medicine. Like I never liked any drugs really. Like every once in a while we would do stuff, but like I really didn't like weed. I didn't like anything really. And for some reason, alcohol just made me calmer where I couldn't freak out because it was just a panic that I would have every once in a while. And so when I was like 20, I started going hard. And then there was a time for like 2 or 3 years where I was intoxicated basically every day.
Mm.
Um, and I ended up quitting sports in college because I opened up a hot dog stand in Nashville, Tennessee. And the reason I opened up a hot dog stand was because I was like, I'm my own boss. I'm outside. I can act silly because I'm just talking to like, I can act goofy while I'm selling this stuff. So it's okay. I can just drink on the job. It's no big deal. Like I don't have to use my brain too much. And so I did that. And then when I was in my early 20s, maybe 21 or 22, I got arrested a few times. So I got like a DUI and then I got in trouble for fighting. And then I had to go to jail for the DUI. And I was like, oh my God, I'm blowing it. Like I feel like I have a lot of potential, but I'm absolutely blowing it. And so I heard about this company called Air Bed and Breakfast at the time. Now it's called Airbnb. And I emailed the founder and I like impressed him enough that he was like, hey, come to my office on Monday. And I was like, yes, sir. See you there. I go out there. He asked me to work at Airbnb when they were early ish. This was 2012. So not that early, but kind of early. They had maybe 100 or 200 people. Get the job offer, go back home to Nashville where I was living at the time, leave school, move all my stuff out there. The day before I'm supposed to start, he was like, hey, we can't hire you. We did the background check and you lied. You said you didn't have you had no arrest record. We don't hire liars. And so I was stuck out in San Francisco without anything. And that's when I started more companies and ended up working out. But basically, from Missouri to Tennessee to California, started having issues when I was like maybe 19, all the way up to like 22, I think. Had a couple false starts where I quit, and then I quit. When it's 10 years ago this month, so however long ago that was, 2013 or 14 or something, maybe it's 9 years ago. I felt like I've been on top of the world since I quit, but it took a long time, like to actually like feel life again, because I was pretty much like lifeless and numb for like 4 years. It felt like people say my age, and I'm like, I kind of feel like I'm 30 because I had like 4 missing years.
I want to read this post that you wrote that you just reshared. I think it was like last week, and it says
I wrote
six.
that. What year did I write that? In 14?
Yeah, July 22nd, 2014.
Yeah.
And it says 6 things I learned from not drinking from 1 year. And it says number one, booze makes me fat. We obviously, I guess, can understand why that is, right? We know that it can impact your health and create excess calories and fuel. But the one I want to focus on now is like exercise makes me feel bad. Like why? How does exercise make you feel bad in a way that alcohol didn't?
I joke with my friends where it's like I exercise and work out so I can kill and eat most everyone in the room or outrun them. And the reason I say that is because like there's a physical component of like it feels good that like, oh, I can kick most people's ass or I can get away. Like there's like a physical like I feel confident and I feel comfortable. It also feels really fun to achieve and hit goals. It's really hard to do that when you're intoxicated all the time. And so when you set easy targets of lifting weight or running a certain distance, it feels awesome to like accomplish that. And also like the endorphins and the rush that you get, it's definitely not as not the same, but it's similar in terms of the high that you get. And so it just made me feel alive. It feels good to like sweat and be in pain and just know that at the end of the once you get to the other end, you're fine. I just love that. I love going through hell and being all right at the end.
How has fitness helped you with like your anxiety and panic and stuff like that? Has it been a tool for that?
Yeah, for sure. Like if I like I just I my panic attacks and stuff, it's all related to like claustrophobia. I'm like
Mm.
I'm a freak about it. I don't like flying, I don't like subways, I don't like rooms without windows, I don't like elevators or feeling like confined. That's why like I'm flipped out about camping, because it's like if I'm out in the wilderness and like no one can find me, that freaks me out. And so like I like to get worn out to the point to where like it's like a dog, you got to walk your dog, otherwise they like start going crazy. So I like that feeling. But just like the feeling of like I can do anything. So the reason I love like body, like working on my body, is it's really fun to be like, all right, you have a goal, and it's like most fitness goals are very, very simple. They're not easy, but they're simple. They're still hard, but it's like, all right, you want to lift this much weight? Okay, then if you eat this much for this amount of time while doing this many reps and increasing weight, and you do that for 6 months, the odds that you can get close to or beat the weight that you want to lift are good. Like that's the only way to get it done. Or you want to run faster, okay, you got to put this many miles in, you have to make sure you do this and this and weigh this much weight. The odds that you can get there are nice. And like just like the idea of like creating plans and following through, it just gives me comfort, and I find a lot of like calming energy in the discipline of doing that.
And then regarding like discomfort and anxiety, other than like the discipline and everything that fitness gives you, like what are some other things that have helped you like get comfortable with embracing discomfort and some of these uncomfortable emotions that might arise?
Just like well, accomplishing things in life
Mm.
like helps. So like just getting older and accomplishing things and just constantly meeting all these really successful people, convincing myself that like these feelings are normal. So I used to run this event called HustleCon, and HustleCon, it was kind of like a TED talk, but it was for startup founders. And I would get the founders of most startups from the 2012 to 2017 era that you know of. So WeWork, Casper mattresses, Bonobos, just like all these cool things, these brands that were launched in that era or were popular in that era. I would get to hang out with them backstage. And I remember hearing them complain about like they're afraid to fire this person because of the confrontation. They're stressed out about investors, whatever. Like all these normal feelings that like you would think a rookie would have, but they weren't rookies. They were highly successful. And yet they were on like the cover of like New York Times and all these business magazines and like that. And I just remember thinking, oh wow, like these guys are 10 times more successful than I am, but they're not 10 times smarter than me. And in fact, they have all the same problems I have. They just go through the motions and like push through anyway. And that was very encouraging. And so once I realized that like I can get most anything done and I can accomplish anything I want, and it was really just a matter of picking what I want. And it just has given me a lot of faith that like most obstacles are overcome. I can overcome most obstacles. And so just like succeeding, whether in business or fitness or relationships, like I was always nervous about if would I ever meet a girl or whatever. And then just like learning how others do it and then adapting and changing my behavior has always given me a ton of confidence, and it normalizes certain fears and behaviors that I thought were abnormal.
That makes sense. And so I'm going to go back to this list because there's a couple in here that I think are so important for people to remember. And one of those things is number 3 says, people are attracted to me more. Like a lot of times I feel like people are worried that they're not going to have any friends or people aren't going to like them when they
That was
stop
my
drinking,
biggest fear.
right? Why
That
are
was
you
my
more
number one
attractive?
fear.
Yeah.
That was my number one fear. I mean, when I was 22 when I stopped, or 23, and I was single, and I'm so like the only way up until that point I had met girls was like we're both drunk out at a bar, and then you like hang out with them another time, and you really hope like, oh, are they gonna like the real me? Like, and you have to drink in order to like make them like for the girl to like you and things like that. That was my biggest fear. I mean, that's most young men's fear, which is how do I meet girls, or how do I get the guys to like me and accept me? And I just used to think I had to be this like loud, gregarious guy. And then I realized, like on a really superficial level, if you tell a girl that you have a drug habit or a drinking habit, and that's why you don't drink, that's kind of mysterious. And that's kind of like some chicks are like, oh, I want to fix you. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's there.
Yeah.
And like, that's a little less important, but that's still like a cool perk of like, oh, you must have a cool backstory. I'm interested. Tell me more. But another thing is like if you're firm with your beliefs and you stick to your principles, that also makes you attractive to both men and women. Of like, oh, I'm very fascinated by someone who's made up the direction and they go that way. That's a very intoxicating feeling.
Mm.
And so once I learned that, I was like, hell yeah, I'm using this to my advantage. And so people liked me a lot more to see that I was very adamant of saying, nope. I like some people would tease me when I first started, and I'm like, I don't drink. Don't even ask me that, or don't give me a hard time. I said no. No means no. And that type of attitude, people flocked toward me because they thought that I had some type of answers, which of course I didn't exactly, but like they liked the confident attitude, and that was like another intoxicating drug.
Yeah. Yeah. People like confidence. They like assertiveness. They like people who are themselves. It's funny. Like I think I've definitely been guilty of this. We chase after the wrong things and we try to become somebody that we think somebody wants us to be to get fulfillment, happiness, to be loved or whatever. But the very thing we're chasing for just doesn't come from trying to be somebody else. It's only going to come from like being confident with who you are, being confident in your decisions. Like people are attracted to that.
There's like a Venn diagram of like business and life and addiction and all that stuff. And at the middle of it is like the ability to control the outcome, not the outcome, but because luck is real, but just believing that you can kick your dent in the universe and that you have control over your life. I think someone I heard say, you're the director of your own movie. I always felt that to be somewhat true, but I was being a punk and I wasn't actually living that life when I had issues. And I thought, well, I can't kick these because that's just how I am. And then once I did, I was like, oh, I can accomplish literally anything. And like, it was as if I had bad eyesight and I finally put on glasses. And then also hanging out with really successful people, just people who accomplish things. And it's not really money, but it's like, you could have an artist or like someone who like says like, I'm going to be a songwriter, and they write hit songs. Like it just the idea of like, I'm like a conqueror of my own life. And that like made me feel that just gave me a ton of comfort once I bought into that and saw success.
You brought up the importance of like the people you spend time with and having this picking up off of the energy of people that are around you and the success of people around you. Who have been like one or two of your biggest like mentors, throughout the last 5 to 10 years?
One of my best friends, his name is Jack Smith. When we were 29, he sold his company called Vungle for $800 million. And Jack's a weirdo. He's one of the weirdest people I know. Like way before like psychedelics were a thing, Jack doesn't drink either, but he loves psychedelics because he uses it medicinally to like overcome some issues he had. And like meeting someone that was like into that type of stuff of where they would like have like a problem and then go out and try new and weird things to solve it. I got a lot of inspiration from Jack Smith. So he's a very interesting person. The most interesting person lately that I've been able to hang out with is Rob Dyrdek, the famous skateboarder. He's been on the podcast a handful of times, and I've chatted with him a bit. And I find him to be one of the more inspiring people I've ever met. And whenever I get to hang out with these people on the pod, some of their mojo definitely tends to wear off on you. So he's like someone lately who I find shockingly refreshing and fascinating. I just love like original thinkers because the world wants you to be like live this vanilla life. And I love people that kick that and make their own thing. So Rob Dyrdek's another person who I really am fascinated by.
That guy's incredible. Like every time I see his name pop up on a podcast, I'm always listening because I'm super inspired by his journey and how he, had all this success in one arena and then he didn't stop him and he just went to the next thing and the next thing. And that guy is just full of wisdom, like how he manages his life, how his relationship with his wife, his family. Like, I'm like, gosh, man, I feel like it's like something, it inspires me just listening to him. And I'm sure that like having a face-to-face conversation or talking to him on the phone is even like 100 times better. But I mean, yeah, he's super inspiring.
Yeah, man, he's fascinating. He's fascinating because for some reason he seems more relatable than like the Zuckerbergs of the world. I don't think he's a genius. He might be, but I don't think he is. There's something about him where I'm like, I can do that if I want to.
Yeah.
And so he's really, really fascinating to me. Well, I take a lot of pride. I think he was the first person, or we were the first. He came on our podcast, My First Million, and I think we were the first time that he came on as like a business guest and like a life guest as opposed to skating. And then now he's blown up. He's everywhere. So he's cool. I joke with him on the pod. I'm like, you're only successful because we made you that, which obviously is not true, but he's cool.
Yeah, he seems like an amazing person. And again, it's super inspiring what he's achieved. Going back to this list, because there's a couple more on here that are incredibly important for people to hear. And number 4, again, this is something that a lot of people have a hard time with, is having fun sober is hard, but feels ridiculously awesome when you do it right. How have you learned to have fun being sober?
Waking up early and not having any regrets and being able to like go out and do things in the morning, like it feels phenomenal to like live life during the day because not a lot of good stuff happens after like 11 p.m. So it feels quite good. My fun is like way more in small groups, and so I have a joke where I say no new friends. Like I had like once I got clean and everything, I met like these 4 guys and they're like my closest friends. And it feels really nice to have those like one-on-one relationships that I have now. And they're and like I don't really want to be friends with that many more people. Like I have my crew and that's what I need. And so like once I developed that, life became a lot more fun.
Yeah, I mean, who you spend time with is so important. I think so many times people are looking for like quantity of people, and I think the quality certainly matters way more. Number 5, intense realism is a freaking amazing rush. What did you mean by that?
A lot of my is about girls, to be honest, because I was single when I wrote that. But like the first time you kiss a chick, like I remember being like intoxicated, like for all of them.
Yeah.
And then I remember like being so afraid to make a move with this woman who I went out with. And I was like, she likes me. I think I like her. Like this could work. Like I remember like the first move and I was so afraid. I was so scared. And I remember it working out. And I was like, oh my God, I'm on top of the world. I could do anything. Like I just remember that feeling of asking a girl out and like being smooth and cool without being intoxicated, just like those types of things. Or if I was afraid to do something, like now I have once I got sober, I used to have this rule. If I see a girl who I like, I had 3 seconds to say hi to her. And I do that with a lot of other things where it's like whenever I'm starting a business, like I'm really afraid to call this person and sell them or to talk to them for advice. Therefore I have to do it. And I've noticed that like I just get a huge rush out of accomplishing those things. Now it's just normal. But when I quit, like the first year or 2 after quitting, everything felt like that. Those all felt like new things to me, and it was like a rush. I loved it.
Super fascinating to me. I mean, I love that. Last one, number 6, and we've touched on this a little bit, but I would love for you to get more in depth on this. When you control your emotions, you control your reality.
Yeah, man. Up until recently, even like maybe I hadn't fully mastered that, but basically, if you look at if my emotions were a graph, it would be like it would look like a wave pool, like extreme highs and extreme lows, and that was fueled by alcohol. I remember like being on alcohol and like it was always like the greatest thing ever or the worst thing, and I don't want to be here at all.
Mm,
And figuring out how to control emotions, and frankly, I still struggle with it, but now it's way better. Where I try my hardest to be a smooth line, to where nothing like gets me incredibly psyched, but I'm also like not incredibly down. Like I'm pretty calm. I'm way calmer now, and like I think they teach this in Stoicism in that book Meditations. Marcus Aurelius, he talks about how like you tell yourself you're going to approach a bunch of dumb people today. The only thing that matters is like the thought and the reaction that I give it. And
mm,
so it's everything of all those six things that we're going through, as well as the previous things I said. It's all about like control. So like I control what I do, my outcome, how I feel. Like as long as I realize that I am in control, there's a lot of power there. And the emotions one is like the last. That's like one of the last. If there's like a hierarchy of like the hardest to achieve but the most powerful, emotions are right at the top.
yeah, I mean, there's so much you can control, and like once you're able to master all that, I think life becomes um a lot easier. How do you deal with a lot of the stuff that you can't control? Because I know you've mentioned, we've talked about anxiety and panic, and a lot of times when you can't control things, that exacerbates anxiety.
I always do this exercise. So before I take any type of big risk, I always think, like, we'll use a business as an example. When I was younger, I always say, what's the upside? So I paint the picture of what the upside is. What's the best possible outcome? What's a likely outcome? And I like say, like, all right, are those cool? Do I like those? If yes, all right, let's go to the next exercise, which is what's the worst possible outcome? And I plan against those. So, for example, the worst possible outcome is I run completely out of money. Okay. Do I want to accept that? I don't. Therefore, I'm going to save $500 and I'm going to call my parents and ask them, is it okay if I move in with you if this doesn't work? And the $500 will fly me home.
Hmm.
All right, great. Can I accept that? I can accept that's the worst possible outcome. Or let's say I like, that's still not good enough for me, or I don't have parents, whatever. Then it's like, all right, the worst possible outcome is I get a job at a restaurant, or I get a job as an Uber driver. Therefore, I should go buy a car now, or I should make relationships with people at the restaurant. Like I think about those things through, and it's like, all right, is that the worst possible outcome that I'm happy to accept? Yes. Therefore, I should move forward. So like I constantly am thinking in that framework of best case, worst case. So what am I okay losing in order to gain X, Y, and Z? And so sometimes the risk that I want to take, the upside isn't appealing, but the downside is horrible. So I'm like, oh, I should not do that. Or other times it's like, well, the upside sounds pretty good. And I think the likely outcome sounds amazing too, but the downside's too huge. Can't do that. And so I try to only take risks where that upside and downside ratio is in my favor, and I accept it.
It's a great process. I'm gonna have to like write that down as you were saying that, because I was thinking, because I'm looking to move to Austin by the end of the year. That's my goal. And I've gone back and forth for probably like, I mean, I don't know, like 2 years on like all the risk, reward. And the biggest risk is money, because it's like a lot of my business is here and it's just new connections, new beginnings. And if I fail, like what's the worst thing that happens? And I keep going back and forth on that. And now I'm at the point where I'm like 97% in on moving, and I know how I'm going to make money and I have revenue streams, but I wish I would have known like that process, because you just simplified it so well. That was like the biggest thing that I'm
Yeah,
struggling with.
and you could literally write it down. You could be like, all right, I'll run out of money. Therefore, I should save $5,000, which is enough time for 2 months rent. And I'll put that 5,000 in just in like a treasury. So it's just earning 5%. And I just can't touch that. It's like, and also I'll keep my monthly expenses down to blank, which means I have to have roommates. Am I willing to do that? Yeah. Okay, then do it. No. Okay, then I got to figure out how to save more money. You know what I mean? Like there's like a pretty logical way that you can go about it, and I do it. I can do it really quickly in my head nowadays, but like I used to sit down and like go through that,
What's
because like what I've noticed with a lot of people and myself is you worry all the time. And so instead I have this thing that I call worry time, which is like I can only worry about it like I'll sit down for 1 hour, and that's will be my worry time. And so I'll like say, all right, let's make a plan on what I think success looks like and what I need to do. Let's go through my risk analysis, and let's do all this, and let's make a decision. All right, are we doing it or are we not doing it? If we are in fact doing it, I move forward and I don't worry anymore. I go, I don't worry. until the number in my bank account hits this or this other threshold is met in our risk analysis. Then I will not even worry, but I move to the protect the downside plan. So like I don't really spend any time worrying about it other than like the time I've allocated to worrying about something.
What's been a recent moment where you've had to go through this process?
I'm going through that a little bit now, but it's kind of a boring example. But I'm also trying to decide where I'm going to live once I have a family. A lot of it was like when I started and sold my company, or when I started and sold the most recent company, we were doing really well, and COVID happened, and then like the George Floyd thing was going on, so like it felt like the world was coming to an end because I lived where a lot of riots were. And then also I got Lyme disease, and I woke up one morning and my face was paralyzed and I thought I had a stroke. 2 weeks into all this happening, HubSpot called wanting to buy the company. And I was like, okay, I could hang on to the company and we could keep growing and potentially sell for blank. Or I could take this money now and get out, but I'm going to miss out on potential upside. And so I structured a deal so I was able to like capture a little bit of both that met my like that made me very comfortable with my risk analysis like setup. And so I made the right decision. Frankly, like once I kind of quit drinking and started getting some momentum, my life has been awesome. Like it's mostly been easy. It felt like it was hell from ages like 16 to like 23. And then once I like started like seeing progress and I had the mindset of like I can do anything, even the really bad days aren't that bad. So I've been very lucky.
Going back to, we talked about risk, and you talked about, selling your business, and how, since sobriety and cutting out alcohol, things have become much more simpler and better for you. But a lot of people in recovery, or people who are trying to get sober, they struggle in those early days. And it seems like, based on your story,
I struggled too, by the way. There was struggle.
Yeah, it seems like you struggle, but you also like had a lot of forward momentum and progress as well that got you like moving in the right way. What did those like first few months look like for you? And then how did you get involved in like the personal development space? You mentioned like the Hustle Con and how you had these speakers from all these incredibly successful companies, and that was right around the time I think when you were getting sober as well. So how did that all kind of come together?
I read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People when I was like in sixth grade, and that kind of like changed everything for me because I remember like reading this book because I had friends, but I feel like I never like was well liked, and I was like I'm embarrassed because of that. I wanna be well liked, and so I saw this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I was like that spoke to me, and then I like deployed the tactics, and I was like oh wow I'm more likable when I like do whatever the book says, like people will trust me more and I care more about other people. And so that kind of like put me down this rabbit hole of like what other books can teach me things. And if I just apply this stuff, and then I just got really into like, I'm not going to invent anything new. I'm just going to steal really cool ideas and strategies from people who have written about it. And that's how I'm going to live my life. And so once I learned that, I realized the similar stuff was in business, where I'm like obsessed with capitalism and business because whether you like it or not, it ain't going anywhere, at least in America. It's here to stay. And getting a lot of capital and money is arguably the easiest way to like make really big changes in your environment. And I think it's also one of the most practical ways to like move forward in life. And so I got obsessed with like, well, this book told me that if I do this, this, and this, I could potentially have an outcome of this. And I did it and I got the outcome I wanted. What other outcomes do I want? And who else can I read about and steal from? And a lot of it was business people. And so I got kind of obsessed with that. And so I taught myself how to write. I was really interested in writing because I realized that like if you use the written word effectively, it's all about persuasion and you could influence people to do anything. A really good poem or something could influence you to feel a certain way, or like a really good book could like make you think about a certain topic. A really good speechwriter could make you vote a certain way, that or a copywriter could make you buy something. I love that idea. So I learned how to write, and then I figure I had sold one company. I didn't make much money, but I made enough that I could live for a year. And I had a bunch of free time. And I was like, let me create this conference and we'll call it HustleCon. And I'll do it to meet a bunch of successful people. So hopefully one of them can like point me in the direction of what my next business should be. Or maybe at the event, I'll meet someone. But like, let me just kill time and do this. And maybe I'll find the way in the process. And I created this newsletter where I would write about the people who were coming to speak at the conference. And in the first 6 weeks, like I had the idea on day 0. And then after 6 weeks, the event happened. I made like 60 grand in profit. And it was mostly from me being decent at writing in the newsletter, selling tickets. And I thought that was really cool. And I made people feel a certain way and they came. And then I did it again when I ran out of that money. And then I did it again. And that's how I started that conference business. Now, the downside of a conference business is like all your money comes from like 2 or 3 days. And so like if it rains or someone gets sick, like it sucks. And so that's why I was like, all right, I'm going to pivot the business into this new thing, which is what the hustle was. But I got into the conferences almost as a way just to like help my own problem and hopefully not lose money along the way. And that's how I started meeting all these really cool people. And I also lived in San Francisco from 2012 to 2018, or sorry, 2012, 2020. And that was like a magical time. And so like a lot of the big name companies that you know about in tech, like it was cool being able to hang out with the people that was building that. And it really just empowered me to the point of like anything is possible. I just like got drunk on that idea. I
Mm.
called myself the manifest cowboy because I was like from Missouri and people thought I was Southern, but like I just got obsessed with this idea of like turning ideas into reality, like whether that means fitness or business or meeting someone, whatever. Like that, the idea of just like taking action and being impulsive about I have to act in order to get to where I want to go and I can't sit still. Like that became an obsession.
You touched on the fact that these conferences and creating these things helped give you clarity and direction on where to head next, like professionally, and helped you personally. Like, did they also help you like in early sobriety? Like, what did you do to stay sober early on? Did you go to meetings? Did you end up going into any kind of treatment? Like, what helped you?
I went to a treatment thing in college because I went to the doctor and I was like, man, I'm really effed up. Like I have this issue. And they're like, let's check your blood pressure. And it was so high. They were like, you got to go to the hospital right now. I get to the hospital and they're like, what's wrong? I'm like, I can't stop. I can't quit. And they're like, well, you're going to die. And I was like, bring it on. I don't know. Like it didn't catch. And then I moved out to San Francisco and the whole Airbnb thing happened. And I'm like, dude, if I don't get my shit together, like this is all over. Like I'm done for. And so I quit. And then I relapsed and I like 3 months later. And then I went to a handful of meetings while I was like still drinking. And I was like, let me see what this is all about. Because I met this guy named Joe who had a successful business, was always the life of the party. Girls always liked him. And I talked to him and he's like, oh, I don't drink. I'm an alcoholic. And I was like, oh, wow. You called yourself that? That's crazy. But he normalized it for me. He's like, yeah, I am. But like, I still have fun. And like, that inspired me so much. So I went to a meeting and eventually, after one bender, I woke up sore and I was like, screw it. And I locked myself in my bedroom and I called out of work for 2 weeks. And I was like, I'm cold turkey in this son of a gun. And eventually, I didn't have a lot of money. I went to a homeless clinic basically in San Francisco. And I remember like pulling up and I had like iPod or my Apple headphones and an iPhone and like a barber jacket. That's like a $300 jacket. And I was in a room full of crazy people, like off the streets. And I was like, this is exactly where I belong. Like, I don't know how like I've been able to stay off the streets. There was times where it was close, but like I belong with these crazy people because I'm crazy. And so I went to this doctor. Her name was Jocelyn, and she was my doctor for like 10 years after that, even once I got money and I just had to pay her privately. That was my doctor. And so I just stayed with her for a long time. She kind of like gave me some medicine and helped me get straight.
Congrats on that, man. That's awesome. I mean, it's so inspiring what you've managed to build like along the way of getting sober. Like a lot of times, people will get, sober and they'll be sober for some time and then they'll come up with their big idea and they'll start something. Like you kind of did this in conjunction with that, which is really impressive.
Well, I was only mildly successful when I was partying. In fact, I wouldn't even say I was that successful. Somehow I weaseled my way into things. But I didn't do a good job of sticking to stuff and having long-term vision because like when you're messed up, like it's like I don't want to get out of bed. You know what I mean? Like it was hard.
Yeah.
But once I quit drinking, that's when like the true success came. Now it's like, and when I say success, I don't just mean money. That's part of it. But like, I just mean of like you set a target, make a plan, and you follow through. That's what I mean by success. I got really good at that.
How have you like? Has you like selling the business? Like, have you? Like, is there anything that you thought that would give you that it didn't? Like, meaning if you thought you made a bunch of money that would get rid of this problem or do this, like, have you had to deal with any of that stuff since selling your business?
So I'll say something that not a lot of people say, which is having money definitely makes you happier.
Mm.
Like knowing that you have a safety net 100% makes you feel better. You still have some problems. There's still a lot of problems. You still get sad and depressed just like everyone else. But like knowing that, like, look, if I don't do anything or if everything I do in the future fails, my family's provided for. I will always have a really nice house. My children will always be handled. My wife is always going to have whatever she needs. Like you feel better that way. There's no doubt about that. I think what I learned, and this is like kind of the feeling that I learned, was you always want more. So I told myself when I was 22, my goal is to have this much money at the age of 30. I got that much money. And I was really pumped for about a year and a half. And then I'm like, and I thought, I don't need any more. I'm done. And then you hang out with richer people than you and you think it's never enough. You always have to go more. And I've hung out with billionaires that say, yeah, but this guy's got 10, or you know what I mean? Like so that's like a weird feeling, is that knowing that it's never enough, which is the same thing as like any athlete, right? You're like, well, I bench press 300 pounds, but I bet I can do 305. You know what I mean? It's like a very similar feeling. And so I think you can use that in a really healthy way. A very fortunate thing is having some amount of money. I don't know what that number is. I definitely think it makes you happier. The unfortunate thing is you always want more, I think.
And so right now you could easily not work, right? And just kind of just go and
Yeah.
do your own thing. But you don't. I mean, you got other
I
businesses,
I
right?
took I took 6 months off. All I did was train and work out for 6 months.
And so what keeps you going now? Is it this pursuit of more money, or do you have this deep rooted purpose and mission still inside of you to keep moving forward?
Well, it's definitely not about the money in that it's just some like I don't need money anymore to like live a certain way, but I pursue money just because it's really fun to have a goal. But
Mm.
money is like the third most important thing. Number one is I just love having a team and to like have a shared like goal and to be in the trenches with employees. That's exciting. Not working is quite lonely. It's not like your friends are going to hang out with you.
Yeah.
Like it's a very lone. It's quite lonely, and I think I don't know how women feel, but a man, I imagine you have to have something to work towards. I think men, like we are hunter gatherers, and it is my job to go out and hunt. And if I'm not hunting, I feel like a piece of crap. Not like hunting with my teammates, that's exciting. That feels fun. And then the second thing is I've had some good success, and I'm very proud of that. But I want to do it times 10 because it feels so exciting and so like adrenaline filled and dopamine filled in order to pull off something huge. It almost feels like, this sounds bad, but I'll say it. But like when you're starting a business, it almost feels like I'm a criminal. Like imagine like a bunch of like, because I used to like do a bunch of bad stuff. Imagine you're about to rob a home and you break in with your friends and you get it and you come home and you got the money. Like you feel intoxicated. You're like, I just pulled off a freaking caper. Like I can't believe I got one over on them. In a way, building a business sometimes feels like that. Of course, the goal is to do things very ethically and to provide value to other people, but it feels like I can't believe I pulled that off. It's that like same feeling, and I like get a high on that. And the bigger it gets, it's like you're gambling more and more, and I love that feeling. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm starting more stuff. And the money is like number three, number four, number five. It's somewhere at the bottom where it's like a nice little cherry on top type of vibe.
I mean, as things are coming full circle, I mean, now people can, I guess, understand why the same thing that made you an alcoholic has made you successful in business. It's that rush to just go and not be afraid to take risks and keep going and get the thing and then move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, just progression. I just love progression. And so it was a similar thing with alcohol, which is like, I think I could drink this. Like that's what a lot, you know what the worst thing to bring to a party is a breathalyzer, like a test.
Yeah.
Because everyone's like, oh, let's see if I can get the highest. Let's see if I can get the highest. It's like the same thing when it comes to drugs and alcohol sometimes, where it's like, let's see how much I can do and still be all right. And so it's definitely like a similar vibe about like constant progression. I think everyone kind of has that fire in them. Maybe some people, the fire is a little brighter than other people, but you know, just the idea of like contribution. I think we all have that. In order to contribute, you got to like progress. So I think everyone has it.
For sure. I mean, I think, I became a personal trainer and then started my own personal training business. And I've been in recovery for almost like 15 years, but I was a drug dealer. Like I sold drugs. And I've realized that over the years that I sold a bunch of weed. I went to jail for selling pot. Like I did 90 days. And that's what fitness actually changed my life when I was actually in jail.
Just like in a county jail?
In a county jail. My sentence was 5 years. I was backing up 5. They suspended everything but the 90 days and I had to do that.
Which
in a,
county or which city?
Hartford County in Maryland.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah.
That sucks, right? County jail sucks.
Oh, dude, it's worse. But I think that I don't know what was worse. What was worse was like in being in the holding cell and not knowing where you were going, and just sitting in there while you were waiting about to find out like what was going to happen to me. Or then you got people just crammed in there, and I'm like detoxing because I was a pill head. I was an opiate addict, and so during my first few weeks in jail, I detoxed cold turkey from the Oxycontin, which was like the most horrific like few weeks of my life. Yeah, and I didn't think I was going to come out on the other side of it. And thankfully, my cellmate got me into working out, and it completely transformed my life when I was in jail.
What was the workout? Just push-ups and sit-ups and standing squats and burpees.
Yeah, and then we would fill up like a plastic bag with water, and we would do like bicep curls, and we could use it as a punching bag, dips, step ups on the bench, jumping jacks, running. But when I first started exercising, I couldn't even do a push up from my knees at all. Like I would collapse, couldn't walk up and down the steps because I was a heavy cigarette smoker as well. But my cellmate he just for some reason knew how to work with people like me and taught me the importance of small steps. And the first thing was getting me to be able to hold myself up in like a push-up position, then doing a push-up and then building off of that. And the same thing with running. So I got taught early on like the value of staying disciplined and compounding small wins and like where all that leads. But
Are there any yoke guys in jail, you think?
yeah, for sure. Which is like, it's so fascinating to me because people are like, oh, you can't use your body, like you need to lift weights. And it's like, I mean, yeah, lifting weights is great, and I lift weights, but I saw some jacked dudes in jail.
How do they get enough food?
I think they eat what they can. I mean, I'm sure sometimes they have a hard time getting enough calories, but if they can afford it, there's this thing called commissary where it's like the jail like store or whatever. And so you can eat fairly enough, but I mean, just somehow these guys, they made it work when I was in there.
Probably some of them are just freaks, just genetic freaks too, but just like it is, I love seeing all those ripped dudes in jail. It is kind of, it just shows you don't need a lot of fancy stuff. I like that.
No, and it was like I was what I wanted. I mean, I was always like the fat kid growing up who had no luck with girls, who wanted to be liked, but I wasn't. And I saw this guy who looked like a more jacked version of Brad Pitt in Fight Club, and I was like, I want that. Like, I want biceps, I want abs, I want to be able to do push-ups, I want to feel confident. And like, thankfully, he was able to kind of help me when I was in there.
That's badass. How many like were any of the people there like freaks when it came to push-ups? Like, could people do like 200 or 300 in a row?
Yeah, he could. I mean, it was mainly just me and him that would work out consistently. I mean, there was a couple other people that would throughout the time there, but yeah, he was like, I mean, he would do like thousands of push-ups a day because he had nothing else to do. And he would do like pull-ups on there was like steps that would go up from the first level up to the second level in the tier we were in. And he would do like pull-ups on the step, and he would put like his feet up on this like the steps beneath and do like rows and stuff. It was pretty crazy, some of the stuff that he taught me when I was in there. But I think a lot of what he taught me, and the most important things, were the ability to manage like these difficult emotions and discomfort. Because before I went to jail, I didn't know how to manage my emotions. I had panic attacks. I actually ended up in the hospital twice because I thought I was having a heart attack, but they were panic attacks when I was younger. And when I got to jail, there was no more hiding from that. I couldn't escape, because if I screamed or I acted out, I could have been in solitary confinement. I wasn't a fighter. I mean, I was always the kid that was afraid to fight. So that wasn't going to happen. I couldn't do drugs in jail. And so it taught me that even though like the feelings and emotions were tough, that I needed to choose something else. I couldn't choose drugs. So me learning how to exercise and run and stuff like that was super transformative for me.
Damn, that's awesome. Yeah, I like hearing about a lot of those prison guys, and just like, because there's some freaks of natures in there. I love freaks, just anyone who's weird, whether it's athletic or brain or whatever. So I like seeing some of these weirdos. It gets me pumped.
Yeah, he definitely got me pumped. I mean, and people in there were like, it's just a lot of these guys are just in there for just trying to do their time and make the most of it, and then get out of there and hopefully go home and see their families and, not get more time. But the guy that mentored me, he was just somebody that really took a strong interest in me and was just incredibly jacked. I mean, like if you saw pictures of what he looked like, I mean, he passed away last year, but he was so shredded, and it's like just insane how shredded he was.
Yeah. I've always like watched videos of, let's call it like prison workouts and shit like that. I like looking at all those.
Last question I have for you is, you talked about how you're the manifesting cowboy, and I came across the way that you craft emails, like I think it was sometime last year, and I was like, man, I'm doing this all wrong. Like, I'm like, hey there, nice to meet you. Like, I'll meet you. It's like super. It was like, I remember you provide an example and just like, don't do this, do this. And I was like, I was always in the don't do this,
Everyone is.
Right. And so there's a lot of people that are listening to this, and whether it's a bit in business or in something personal, they're trying to always communicate better, whether that's DMing somebody on Instagram, whether that's sending out a cold email. Like, what are a few tips you would give somebody that can make their like online communication more effective if they're trying to get in touch with somebody that's busy?
The easiest one is called AIDA: attention, interest, desire, action. And that's like a template in order to grab someone's attention and get them to do what you want them to do. It's like the most classic thing ever. But like an example would be like, if I wanted to make you drink more water, if I said like, drink water because it's good for you, that's one way to do it. Or if I said, hey, do you ever see those big guys walking around the gym with gallon water bottles? That's my attention getting thing. So I grab your attention. The interest is like, you see, they're doing that because drinking a gallon of water a day increases your muscle size by 30% over a year time. That's not true, by the way. I'm just making this up. And then the desire is you make them want it. And so you list features. So like, if you drink more water, that means that you'll have better skin, which means you'll be able to get more girls. Your muscles will get 30% bigger. So if you weigh 150 pounds now, that means you're going to weigh 190 of pure muscle, and you'll save $10,000 a year because that is how much you spend on non-water beverages. And then the action, so AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action, is like, so if you want to drink more water, here's what you do. Go get a 1 gallon milk jug. You can use that for 30 days, fill it up each time in the morning, every single morning, and drink it by 7 p.m. So it's like a very specific formula where it ends with a very specific action. But another thing that people really screw up with when they communicate with people is they don't balance the perfect combination of professional and casual. A lot of people think that when you're selling stuff, because it's like in a professional setting, that means that like you have to be uptight and nerdy and vanilla and all that. The reality is that a person is a person. You aren't one human being from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and 5 p.m. to midnight. You're one whole person, meaning you like to joke around. You like to say, what's up, man? Like you can, but you don't want to be like, yo, bro, that's a little bit too casual. But you got to find that perfect balance of like, hey, what's going on? I'm going to be short. I do this, which means this will happen to your business if you buy this. If you want to talk, I'm free tomorrow at noon. Just say yes. Worst case scenario, you have a new friend in the industry. Best case scenario, maybe we make a bunch of money together. Talk soon. Like something that short can do a pretty good job. And that uses the AIDA formula.
So selfishly, like if I were trying to get better at getting guests on my show, like would I lead with something like that and then talk about like how many people listen to my show and stuff like that?
100%. Yeah. And you have to like figure out what motivates people. So usually it's ego or it's beneficial. So like because if I don't know how big your show is, but if you can't, like some shows like Joe Rogan, he's like 5 million people listen to every episode. It's like, dude, that's all you had to say. I'm in. But if you're not that big and you aren't going to have a lot of benefits, you'd be like, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? Here's a bunch of the cool people who have come already. If you come on, we're going to talk about this topic, and this topic. All you have to do is say yes. It involves zero preparation. I'll send you a link and we'll schedule the time and it'll show up and it only takes 45 minutes. So you like usually something like that, I think would work a lot better than what other people typically do.
Yeah. Cause I'm typically, hey, my name is so-and-so and blah, 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 blah. And then I got to get better at it. Cause when I'm reading pitches coming in, I'm like, dude, get to the point already.
Yeah. Because here's the thing. The whole thing with copywriting comes down to one thing, which is no one cares about you. They only care about themselves. And once you understand that, it makes persuasion so much easier. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how I am going to help you. And all you have to do is say yes, and I'll handle the rest. So I'm going to make it frictionless. And all you have to do is say yes. And I'm going to appeal only to your ego and your wants. It's all about you. It's not about me. So like, I don't need to say like, I've been in the game for this long. I have these many episodes. Like, dude, shut the fuck up. I don't care about you. I only care about me. Make me look cool. get me more customers. I want to talk about a topic that I've never talked about. I want to come on because all these other cool people have been on. So that's going to make me also cool. I want to come on because you're going to reach a ton of people. I can get my message across. It's all about me. It's not about you. And so that's typically like the way to write.
That's a great way for us to leave it. And I'm definitely going to be taking notes as I re-listen to this. So Sam, thank you so much for coming on. I know your time is valuable. And I know the audience is really going to appreciate this episode. You dropped a lot of wisdom. You dropped a lot of like just tactical things that people can use and implement into their lives. But if people want to connect with you, if they want to listen to the podcast, if they want to learn more about what you're doing, if they want to get involved in some of your businesses, where's the best place to do that?
My Twitter and Instagram, where I post a bunch of stuff, and I guess my threads, my Facebook threads, that's the Sam Parr. And then my company is called Hampton. So joinhampton.com. Just check it out. If you run a company that does at least like 3 million in revenue, it might be interesting to you. But that's it.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll make sure to include the links to that stuff in the show notes. And for those listening, what I invite you to do is to share a takeaway. We talked a lot about sobriety. We talked a lot about business. We talked a lot about life. We talked a lot about emotional health. We talked a lot about persuasion. We talked a lot about Sam's story. So whatever your biggest takeaway was, make sure to tag Sam and tag myself, because we'd love to hear your feedback. And we once again thank you for listening to this episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and we'll see you next time.